You already know Dad doesn't actually want another tire watch. So this Father's Day, gift him the tender, juicy taste of his favorite cut of steak from Omaha Steaks. Their high-quality steaks and proteins are perfect for summer grilling. Plus, you'll get an extra $35 off with promo code AUDIO at checkout. Omaha Steaks is a family-owned company with over 100 years of expertise in the meat industry. That means premium meats for premium dads. Every steak is flash frozen and vacuum sealed at the moment of peak freshness, so every bite is as delicious as the day it was carved. Try the fan favorite Butcher's Cut Filet Mignon that has earned the coveted distinction of USDA certified very tender. Give the dads in your life something to savor. Visit omahasteaks.com and get an extra $35 off with promo code AUDIO at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com and get an extra $35 off with promo code AUDIO. Terms apply. See site for details.
Hey, warm up from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. Here in segment number 1, I'll give you guys the known NBA draft decisions that came off the board on Wednesday. I will probably need to do a few of these on the podcast tomorrow because the deadline was midnight. Some of these are very much at the last second, and we saw in the case of Billy Richmond, him decide to stay in the NBA draft at first, and then he changed his mind like an hour or so later. So I will probably have a little bit of cleaning up to do on these tomorrow, but I'll give you these in segment number 1. Then in the second segment, we had a chat with our good friend Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. A few of the big decisions were a little bit unknown as we were chatting with him, but we'll take a look at some of those, and we're going to be talking with him about what we've all seen out of LSU here in the last few weeks. In the final segment, did see a few college basketball transfer moves. I will recap those. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to throw those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I do beggeth you, I do pleadeth you, please do send in these Twitter/X questions because it'll help this offseason go by a little bit faster. But how about if we do take a look at the known NBA draft decisions as I am recording this, as we do know that Amari Allen, he is going to be returning to Alabama, and I mentioned this on the podcast over the last few weeks. It really feels like with the NBA draft decisions, the SEC had the most to gain/lose with Amari Allen. He was very solid over at Alabama this last year. 11.5 points, 7 boards, 3 assists, 6'7" combo player. Felt like he could really be the man at Alabama this season, especially with there being a little bit of turmoil with not knowing what's going to happen with Aiden Holloway, his current, shall we say, case and investigation. So that's something that I think is going to be helping out Allen, and he did not measure out the world's greatest at the combine, so he's returning to school. He's probably going to get a whole bunch of money to return to school, so he's back at Alabama. One other decision with regards to the SEC that is known as I'm recording this, Billy Richmond. I'm currently doing this as Malik Thomas. A little bit TBD. If that becomes known, I'll have that for you at the back half of the podcast, but he withdrew from the NBA draft. It sounded like he was going to be staying at first, but then he flipped his mind and he has decided that he is going to be back at school. For Billy Richmond, he was a guy that was a nice ancillary piece last year over at Arkansas, and he has good athleticism, about 11 points per game, shot just 26% from 3-point range at 6'5". Certainly needs a little bit of work there, but had some active hands on defense. He's going to be a big part of this Arkansas team for the upcoming season, so that was big for them. And then Andrei Stojakovic, a nice part of Illinois. Once again, it feels like the commonality with a lot of these guys that did return to school was their 3-point shot was not necessarily great. That's why I'm going to be asking in the next segment with our good friend Ryan McIntyre what he thought of Koa Pete, because I feel like that's the one knock on him, because if it weren't for that jump shot, he probably would be a lottery pick right now. That's a little bit more in question, but for Stojakovic, 13.5 points, 4.5 boards, did shoot a paltry 24.5% from 3-point range. Certainly not looking like Beja out there, but certainly a guy that I think is going to be able to make a big impact for this team with having so many of the international men of mystery back from season ago, David Mirkovic and guys like that, the Visic brothers. Illinois very much locked and loaded to be a top team out there in the Big Ten once again. Then in my opinion, these were the 3 biggest ones to watch out for. Tyler Tanner, this is exactly what I expected. He is going to be returning to Vanderbilt. I thought that Vanderbilt had by far far the most to gain/lose because he was the heart and soul of that team last season. For Tyler Tanner, he had 2 half-court shots rim out on him, so hopefully he gets a little bit of better luck there. But 19.5 points, 5 assists, just a little bit undersized for the NBA right now, but a 37% three-point shooter, able to do a great job with his active hands as well. 2.4 steals per contest. Like, there was a time where Vanderbilt was in a little bit of flux with the Frankie Collins situation. He was the man that really stabilized them when he was on the floor versus off the floor. Big, giant difference there. So that one was big. Milan Mimicevic, good news for teams that are looking for a three-point shooter in the transfer portal. He's going to be returning to school. I'm going to speculate with our good friend Ryan McIntyre in the next segment as to what to expect there, because he was averaging 17 points per game on 48.7% three-point shooting. No doubt about it. He is going to be very coveted in the transfer portal. He's probably going to be getting millions upon millions of dollars, and I'm sure that he probably didn't get quite the NBA guarantee that he wanted, and he knows he's going to be able to get that in college. I know that his agent is probably working things. He's trying to play a little bit of dumb right now, so always appreciate that, but he is back. And Cole Pete, it does sound like he is going to be staying in the NBA draft. I thought that this could have been absolutely massive for Arizona, and for Cole Pete, he did shoot 35% from three-point last season, really didn't take a lot of threes, did struggle throughout the draft process, and you know that Arizona would have loved to have him back. 14 points, 5.5 boards, burst onto the scene in that big opening game against Florida, kept it going for the entirety of the season, but he heads on into the NBA draft. He is going to be staying in there, and for Arizona, still going to be a very good team. They're still going to be a top 10 team. I felt like with Cole Pete, they were probably a top 5 preseason team. Now you have to have a few more question marks with that. As more of these roll in, I will be inserting those in as well. Like I said, I might need to clean some of these up on the podcast tomorrow, but we do have quite a bit to be able to dive in on. Our good friend Ryan McIntyre, he's got his finger on the pulse of a little bit of everything. We'll chat with him about what we're seeing with LSU, these draft decisions, and so much more right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Ryan McIntyre aboard. He does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network with the Show the College Experience. He and Kobe Dant do such an excellent job on that front. I know that our good friend Ryan is doing a great job looking at college baseball this time of year. He's getting set for football. He's always doing a great job on the college basketball front. And he also does amazing work with regards to West Virginia athletics as well. The Ryan and Rush Show, he does a tremendous job there. And he's based out there in Morgantown. He's going to have a really nice regional this week for college baseball as well. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at Moneyline_Mac, spelled MAC. And Ryan, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Greg, always appreciate it. And yes, we're gearing up here in Morgantown for a fun weekend, but let's talk some college hoops.
Absolutely. That's going to be a group of death out there. A lot of people are calling it for the College Baseball World Series. And right now, the SEC is looking like a group of death upcoming for the upcoming college basketball season, as LSU is trying to turn the SEC into a college basketball conference, into a professional conference. And I want to get your thoughts here as to what we've seen over the last week and a half here for LSU, because you knew that with Will Wade, he probably had something up his sleeve with the slow amount of signings that we saw early on in the offseason. This is very, very wild, to say the least. And even though they have signed these guys, who knows who's all going to be eligible for them?
Yeah, wild is a funny way of putting it. And
I tried to keep it PG here.
Yeah, the Wild Wild West, Will Wade back in Baton Rouge. I think it's a good thing because I think now we're going to get some clarity, Greg, because if they allow these guys to play, then who even knows what college basketball is anymore if these guys are ruled eligible. So I agree with Todd Golden. We should get some clarity now because we have not seen the different levels of bringing guys back that got drafted like Will Wade is doing at LSU. So it's fitting that he also did it. I also of the opinion, I don't blame Will Wade because there are no rules. I don't really understand the narrative that he's to blame. He's the head coach of LSU, not the head coach of the coaching profession. So of doing things the right way. So if they're not going to have rules, you might as well just do whatever you want. And you're paid to win games, not be a nice guy.
Yeah, and with Will Wade, certainly he's not really been one to follow the rules, the world's greatest, to say the least. And what sort of action do you think that the NCAA might take in response to this? Because we know that the 5-and-5 rule is out there. I know that they're talking about bringing that up a little bit more and having bigger conversations about that in the month of June. I know that Kevin Sweeney had a report, and he does great work over there with so many different outlets in terms of the NCAA trying to make a lot of these international men of mystery ineligible. And I think that it's just a very, very, shall we say, trying time for the NCAA because you mentioned it. There's no rules, and it feels like they're trying to make them up on the fly.
They completely are doing it on the fly. So, yeah, I'm interested to see what they do, just like I'm sure everybody is. I would imagine that I don't see how RJ Lewis can be eligible. I mean,
it's on 3 graphic at multiple NBA teams.
Yeah, I mean, come on. So, like, that one, I would imagine that they're going to rule ineligible. But the problem is that the NCAA just gets sued and they never win any of these court cases. So you got to think Will Wade knows something, too. And we've seen the more southern states get more of a favorable ruling with some of these judges.
Yep, you certainly are right there, as we do have Ryan McIntyre, who does such a great job over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and it's going to be very interesting to see what we get out of some of those court cases as well. And just how do you take a look at the SEC? Because we're doing this prior to knowing a lot of those draft decisions on Wednesday, but I feel like they had a lot riding on Wednesday with the likes of Tyler Tanner out there in the NBA draft process. Obviously, Milan Mimicelovic, she's being courted by a lot of SEC teams along with Louisville. We're going to be seeing what's going to be happening on that front as well. And I felt like the SEC had a lot to gain/lose more so than any other conference with these NBA draft decisions.
We're going to know some more details here, but we were talking about the different transfers, but also guys coming back to school. We saw just last year Lendenberg's decision come all the way down to the wire. Obviously, we saw what happened. He comes back. He transfers to Michigan. They go on to win the national championship. Momcilovic, he's kind of the big domino on the board right now. I think he'll come back, and I would imagine he'll probably be going to Kentucky or Louisville just because they have so much money to spend, and both teams are in dire need of a wing that can make shots.
Yep, absolutely. I'm right there with you. I think that he's going to be going to the great state of Kentucky. We're going to be seeing what's happening there. And then I know that this hasn't been reported too much, but Dalen Swain, if he returns to Texas, and I personally think that he's probably going to be staying in the NBA draft, I think that that's one that not a lot of people are talking about that could be very, very impactful if he decides to head back to a Longhorns team that it feels like they've been lost in the shuffle of the offseason because I like what Sean Miller has done here.
I liked what Sean Miller in that program, the momentum that they got from that Sweet 16 run in year one. So we've seen Sean Miller's 10 years. Usually take a jump here in year two. I like the class that they brought in. It looks like they're waiting to see if they can add one or two more pieces.
Yep, exactly. As we do have Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And perhaps this will be known by the time this podcast comes out Thursday morning. But I still feel like the one team that I probably would have outside the top 5 right now that has the potential to become a top 5 with these NBA draft decisions, it's Koa Pete. He changed around his shot. He didn't necessarily look the greatest at the NBA draft combine. How do you see that decision going? Because I feel like that would be a massive one for Arizona. One where I think they're still going to be solid regardless, but I see them as more like a top 8, top 10 team if he doesn't come back. I feel like they could be in the top 5 if they do get back Pete.
I think we could be talking about going back to a Final Four for the Arizona Wildcats. If Koa Pete comes back, he could be in the running for National Player of the Year. That's how good and I think how high his upside is. So I think he'll probably stay in the draft. But I've been wrong on some of these decisions before, just with how much money these guys can make staying in college basketball. It's a completely different landscape. And I think we're seeing that too, Greg, where we're seeing the fewest amount of guys in the NBA draft in years because guys can stay in school, make money, still live the college life, and then go be a pro down the road.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And we've been noticing that more and more these guys like Thomas Ha. A lot of people thought that he was either going to be a lottery pick or just outside the lottery. He really didn't even test the process. He just decided that he was going to be going back to Florida. We did see Ruben Chenyulu a few days ago. He decided to return to Florida as well. And that's a team that feels like is locked and loaded in an SEC that feels very, very interested in not just getting back to where they were 2 seasons ago, because felt like last year was good for them, but maybe a little bit down from where they were 2 years ago, to not just having what they had 2 years ago, but exceeding it.
I think Florida's kind of separated themselves as preseason number one. I would imagine with bringing back that entire front court that they're going to be just as good as anybody. And Todd Golden, I think we'll have a chance to win a second national championship in 3 years. We kind of saw this with Villanova a couple of years ago where they won their first national championship. They kept that core together. They got upset in the second round by your Wisconsin Badgers, just like Florida did with Iowa. Now Florida has a chance to do exactly what that Villanova team did.
Yep, and I still remember that very, very well as well, because it felt like Villanova was always one of those teams that disappointed in the NCAA tournament. Then they're able to kick the door down, and I feel like a lot of people don't understand how difficult it is to win a national championship. As the Big Ten, who up until Michigan won the title this past season, it had been since 2020 in the Flintstones of Michigan State that had won a title, so give Gonzaga a little bit more of a pass when you say that they have no titles and everything like that. So I always think that that needs to be taken into account. But that said, certainly I do think that it's going to be interesting to see what we get there. And speaking of the SEC, I still feel like the most impactful move with regards to a respective team is Tyler Tanner in Vanderbilt. Not that he's the best player that has a decision to make or anything like that, but I do feel like if Vanderbilt gets him back, they're going to be solid in the SEC. Maybe not like top three good, because we mentioned it with Florida separating themselves. Tennessee has obviously had a great offseason. Texas has had a great offseason. Alabama as well. But I feel like with Vanderbilt, they're still a contender if they do get back Tyler Tanner. Without him, I just don't see them being anything better than like middle of the road, even maybe a little bit below that in the SEC.
He had a great year last year. I think he should come back. I think he will come back. And if he comes back, that backcourt's going to be good once again for Byington. I think they have a chance to get to the second weekend if he comes back.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And we mentioned a few of the guys that are currently both in the portal and the NBA draft. How much do you think that it puts a lot more emphasis on Milan Memosalovic, the fact that on Tuesday, Alan Graves decided that he was going to stay in the draft as well? Because it felt like if you miss out on the pieces in the transfer portal before, like Kentucky, I know that LSU had a little bit of a conversation as well, that you were going to have really two main guys in the draft that were going to be entering in the portal. Now, if it's Milan, who's the lone guy that comes out there, I feel like there's going to be a big bidding war there, and we're doing this before we know whether or not he's going to be coming back to school or staying in the draft. But if he doesn't come back, then I think these teams are really SOL.
Yeah, no kidding. And Greg, also, if you remember, Lendenberg was the big one last year and made all that money. Coleman Hawkins was also the last guy.
Oh, yes.
And he was able to cash in on that multi-million-dollar deal by waiting. So Montrolovic is definitely going to have his nice little payday just by being the last guy on the board or the last decision. We've just seen that in the last couple of years.
Oh, he can get a king's ransom. Now, that did not work out for Kansas State, to say the least. Coleman Hawkins, he got a lot of money, and, well, they didn't get a lot of wins for the money that they paid him, but I don't necessarily pin that on Coleman Hawkins. That was just a rough go of it for Kansas State, to say the least, those last few seasons. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with regards to these decisions. And I also do think that the Amari Allen decision is worth noting as well, because he's another guy that didn't have the combine that he was hoping for. Alabama may have fudged the numbers just a little bit on his height. He was listed at 6'8", doesn't even come in at 6'6". I understand that on a lot of like dating apps and everything like that, you can't give yourself a half an inch. So I'm 5'9.5". I just have to round up to 5'10". I'm sorry if I lie about the half an inch, but that really hurt his process, to say the least. But I think this could be a good thing for Alabama if he comes back, especially with the Hollowell case and what we're going to be seeing with that. And I feel like they could really use Amari Allen to be a top 5 team once again in the SEC.
And we know what we're getting with NATO. They're going to play their style of basketball, stick to their identity. And by the way, hilarious with the dating app reference on a college basketball podcast.
Yeah.
I like how you threw that in there. That was funny.
Hey, that was great. I mean, it's true. They should allow you to list half inches. Like, if you're 5'9.5", you should be able to tell the truth. Like, we're trying to be honest gentlemen here. We're trying to tell the perspective suitors what they're exactly going to be getting. I can't say that I'm 5'9" because I'm taller than 5'9". I'm not 5'10" either, but they make you round up. So shame on the abs, but never a shame on you, Ryan, because you always do such a great job here on this podcast whenever you join me. I know you yourself have been on the scene, to say the least. We were talking with our good friend Kobe Dent of the Sports Gambling Podcast about that. Had a nice little bit of a chuckle there, but you're doing an absolutely tremendous job looking at so many things. College baseball, college football, college basketball, the dating scene in Morgantown, and so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Much appreciated, Greg. Yeah, we like to have fun here at Morgantown.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can follow me on the Twitter X at Moneyline_Mac, college experience year round. Big time for college baseball, obviously. And then Coaches Tour actually begins this week, Summer Coaches Tour, and then the college football 138 team previews then. So, yep, appreciate it, Greg. Always appreciate you having me on.
And if you see Ryan putting down some Miller Lights, Bud Lights, what have you, you know that man has earned it because he puts in the work. He does a great job looking at all these sports, and every single time he joins me on such great insight. So big thanks to Ryan for joining me on Coast to Coast. It's now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming next, let's take a look at the news and notes we saw in college basketball Wednesday. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always a pleasure to be joined by our guy, Ryan McIntyre, does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Does a great job with baseball and so much more every single time he joins me on such great insights. Did so once again today. So big thanks to Ryan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. We hit upon a lot of those NBA draft decisions up front, and if any come in at the last second, I will squeeze those in here. But Jaden Kempson, he has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Florida A&M. Really good get for Florida A&M. Now, he was limited to 24 games due to injury, but eyeing out there in the America East, 10 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists, 29.5% three-point shooter, but pretty good on the defensive end of things as well. He was able to generate about a steal and a half per contest, and Charlie Ward, I feel like, has done a pretty solid job here with Florida A&M. Obviously, they're going to have a lot of turnover from last year. They lose some of the guys like Anquan Bolden Jr. and company, but even with the coaching change that we saw last season, he was able to retain some of those guys from the previous Patrick Crary regime, and he was really able to find his tune as a coach as well. Things were a little bit sloppy at the beginning part of the season. Florida A&M really dug into the fact that they were able to do a nice job in terms of playing some tough, tenacious defense. They were able to generate turnovers. He's very much going to be able to fit that mold as well. Now for Florida A&M, they're probably going to be leaving something to be desired with regards to their three-point shooting, but so being able to get this sort of an ad on the board, I say, but mostly going for junior college guys. This is really the lone Division I guy that they've been able to haul in there, but so do like this move for them. AJ Smith, he has decided that he is going to be adding on over to Georgia State. He was limited to just 8 games last year over at Temple. We give our ode to Lane Kiffin, go Owls, and he was averaging about 8 points per contest in those games, and for AJ Smith, he's had a little bit of a long and winding road as he was over at Charleston, he was over at the Citadel as well. Last we saw him in a full season over at Charleston, he was averaging about 11.5 points, 3 boards. Has never been a great three-point shooter. 29% three-point shooter. Go back to his time at the Citadel a few seasons ago. He was a 16-point per game guy. So he has shown that he's able to carry the mail for a team, albeit a relatively low-end team. But still, with Georgia State, I feel like they've done a nice job here in the offseason, and I really like Jonas Hayes as a coach, but it's clear that he was just not working out for them. So they bring in a guy in John Cremens, who's never really been a guy that's been in the main seat, but still has been an assistant in many, many different levels of college basketball for many great programs, and I like what he's been able to do here in the offseason. For Georgia State, they've got a little bit of fire and ice going on. They're going to be probably needing to add a little bit more down low, and Smith should be able to help them be able to hit the boards. You've got a guy in Eric Parnell, who's a nice double-figure scorer coming over from Fairleigh Dickinson. Jacob Myers, who was over at DePaul, UAB, and a few others. He should help run the point. Gene Jackson is a guy that was averaging double figures over there at South Dakota. Jacob Fredson Cole, who comes over from McNeese, should be able to give you a bit of something down low. Georgia State, I think, is going to be very solid out there in the Sun Belt for this upcoming season. Really like what Cremens has been able to do here. Sebastian Robinson, he was the top scorer over at the New Jersey Institute of Technology last year, about 15 points, 2 assists, 1.3 steals per game. Now, awful three-point shooter, but still was able to stuff the stat sheet for this unit. He has decided that he is heading on over to Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and this is just a textbook Texas A&M Corpus Christi ad. For Corpus Christi, not a team that's necessarily going to light you up from three-point range or anything like that, but pride themselves on good, solid defense, and for NJIT, they were very much that. Now, Corpus Christi hasn't added in there a lot of guys, but I like the guys that they've added. Jordan Mazzell is very much going to fit the system, nice in terms of generating turnovers, and then Benio Basil, who is over at Wagner, he was able to average like 8-9 points per game, a part of a Wagner team that's always pretty rock solid on defense. At 6'8", he's going to be able to help them hit the boards as well, so I like the small class that they've been able to bring in. Have to think that they're going to be adding in there some non-Division I guys and some JUCOs as well, but I do like what they're bringing to the table here. You've got Freddie Sila. He was over at Arkansas State this last season. He was averaging about 4.2 rebounds per game. He has decided that he is going to be adding on over to Southern Indiana. For Southern Indiana, they just had all sorts of issues on offense last year. Their defense was pretty rock solid, and they've been able to make some adds here in the offseason that I think are solid, but for Southern Indiana, you still have to wonder where the offense is going to be coming from. LEA's pretty unproven guy coming over from UTEP. Donovan Hunter was a part of a very good Bellarmine offense, and same with Abri Makaba. He comes over from Fort Wayne, but these were not really main guys. I like Afan Trinka, who comes over from UT Martin. He should be able to keep this team very much up and running with regards to their defense, and when it comes to Sila, he was not a guy that really popped it a lot from three-pointers, really didn't have too many opportunities to be able to do so. Was a nice ancillary guy. I did see a few starts, but again, with Southern Indiana, do think that they're going to be a really good team on defense. That offense, still very much a question mark, and that three-point shooting, it is as well. And for Georgetown, they've had a lot of question marks, and here in the offseason, I feel like they need to do a little bit more because they're just not keeping up with the Joneses out there in the Big East. We've even seen Marquette hit the transfer portal and bring in some guys. Victorious Miller, I think, is a really good ad, though. He was over at Oklahoma State last year. Prior to that, he was over at LSU, and he was a 10.5 point per game scorer this last season, heading on over to a Georgetown team that it felt like they needed a little bit more in the backcourt, and I think that this is going to be very good in terms of being able to give them that more, for lack of a better term. And for Georgetown, he adds to a team that has brought in some guys I think have a lot of upside. With Jalen Lowe, last season he was banged up at Kentucky, but was a double-figure scorer 2 seasons ago at Pittsburgh. He's able to dole it out. Marco Jackson just never really got truly that opportunity at Kansas to shine. Still a little bit of a jury's out situation there. Joel Michaud, he was a nice shot blocker over at Charleston, as we know. That's going to be a big step up in competition. And Josiah Parker, I feel like has untapped potential, but coming over from Florida A&M, so I have a little bit of question mark there. But for Miller, guy that's able to shoot 37.5% from three, is going to help spread the floor a little bit more. I think that this is a good ad for Georgetown. Again, Georgetown still, in my opinion, at the bottom end of the Big East right now, but they're making some moves, and it feels like they are keeping notes that, hey, this conference is going to be really, really good this year. I mean, you're taking a look at what Providence is doing, you're taking a look at what Xavier is doing, and it's very impressive what we've been seeing out of those teams, and it has been pretty impressive, the fact that we have seen so much movement here in the offseason. It's not the easiest thing to take note of and to be able to keep up with every single day, but this podcast is committed to being able to do so, and then once we get in season, the picks and analysis are going to be back on every single game, every single day, and I'm going to look to make this the best college basketball season ever. So if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GUnit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Big thanks once again to Ryan McIntyre of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network for joining me in the previous segment. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast. Here in the offseason, we're looking at the news and notes of college basketball. And once we get in season picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you tuning in today. And I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.